Welcome to this introduction to targeted individuals and V2k. We begin with an overview validating targeted individuals in under 90 seconds. Then we show what V2k may really mean. MI5's Barry Trower explains how voice assaults are easy, NTD News reports on V2k equipment having proliferated in China, and we see an example of microwave weapons in a US residence. Finally, we settle in for a presentation by Craig LaForest with Robert Duncan in January 2023.
And looking at citizen complaints, that they may be being subjected to what's known as psychotronic weapons and biocommunication technologies. The complaints seem to be increasing. I've specifically been working with one group of over 1,000 what are called targeted individuals. This is a highly educated group. Over 50% of them have a college degree.
Dr. Robert Duncan. First question for you. What's negative about what you've done?
I've empowered the dark side by some of my work.
And what do you mean by that?
Technology is neutral.
Right.
It can be used for good or evil. I've worked on projects for the CIA, Justice Department, Department of Defense.
Is this the stuff, voices in the head and things like that?
Yes.
We've run into a few people that claim they got voices in their heads, they sleep inside tinfoil boxes. When they talk to us, they seem totally normal, they seem totally sane. Are these people crazy, or is the government doing this to them?
The government's doing this to them. They're called voice of God weapons.
So you know for a fact that these weapons that you worked on, they're being used domestically today?
Absolutely. You have to remember, the CIA has a long history of experimenting on our citizens, from LSD.
Sure. Okay, we're talking here like going back to MK Ultra and all that in the 60s and 70s, but we were told all that stopped. Is that untrue?
Untrue. These programs continue under new names, new budgets. It's the ultimate weapon.
Are there citizens of this country that are being abused with this technology?
Worse than abuse, that's a light word. They're being tortured.
Targeted individuals aren't crazy after all. Okay, doctor, to deliver this, how do they get into your head? I've heard of these grand powers. They allegedly were used before, and now they claim that they're not used for anything.
They do match up with the properties and necessary capabilities. They easily could be broadcasting across the country messages to people and causing them extreme pain. That's part of the whole world domination strategy. Control the population from subconsciously to consciously.
So what you're telling me, every one of us at some point will be targeted?
The technology's advanced that far.
Why is voice to skull abbreviated V2k instead of V2s? Good question. V2k can stand for the facial maxillary nerve, designated V2, along with a coupling coefficient designated K, for piezoelectric material implanted in targeted individuals' teeth via CIA's Project Moonstruck in the 1950s, but more easily now sprayed and chemically deposited or seared into faces by directed energy, sometimes an indoor sensation of wind or burning on a face. Pseudonymous Electric Angel explained it in a trilogy ending in the Radiohead protocol. Now we'll see how it works on Jesse Ventura.
Jesse Ventura has his doubts that the HAARP antennas can broadcast radio waves that influence people's thoughts. But Nick Baggage is prepared for the skeptics.
This is a standard CD player, and what these are is piezoelectric transducers, and in simple language, they carry a signal that can enter the nervous system so you can get that proverbial voice in the head. And so by activating this, placing these electrodes on the surface of the skin, blocking the ears tightly, you'll hear the music just as if your ears were playing it, but the ears have nothing to do with it. The eighth cranial nerve, the part that connects to the brain, has nothing to do with it.
So in other words, I can touch this in my neck and hear it without my ears hearing it, and no one else in the room will hear it?
That is correct. I want you to block your ears really tightly so you can't hear it.
Now, Dr. Nick Baggage is showing him how the HAARP transmitter can send a signal directly to his brain.
Wow.
So what did you hear?
Well, I heard music, but it's strange because I listened to try to figure out where the music was coming from, and it seemed like right here.
Right.
It sounded like I was hearing it almost through the top of my head or my forehead.
Right.
MIT was awarded a number of years ago to Woody Norris. This is 2005 or 2006. And that award was $500,000 for doing what's called acoustic heterodyning, being able to send a signal from 2 points into an individual so they literally hear a voice in their head that nobody around them hears.
I mean, voices are the easiest ones because all you have to do is stimulate the cochlea with a set resonant frequency. It's very easy. Voices are very easy. And it isn't people imagining voices, they physically hear them. You can physically make people hear voices, certain voices, and it can be any conversation, and it can be anybody you want to hear. It can be a soft, angelic voice, it can be a god, it can be something that scares you like a devil, it can be anything.
That addressed V2k in the US and UK. What about targeted individual torture operations worldwide? Here's an example from China with compelling details in less than 90 seconds.
Some claim the Chinese regime has developed a special kind of technology used to broadcast information directly into a person's mind. It's allegedly used to silence those who dare to speak out.
Wang Haibang says he's been suffering from what he calls electronic harassment for 12 years. He explained that it all started after he filed a corruption report in 2008. It was against then police chief of the Wuning County Public Security Bureau inside Jiangxi province. Soon after, he described being illegally detained, beaten, intimidated, and framed. Not long after that, he was involved in a car accident, something he says was staged. It left him hospitalized. He explained that since then, a device has been used to send information directly to his mind.
They observe my mind with the device and watch my movements. They also use the audio function to send voices to my mind, disturbing me around the clock. The local officials are too corrupt. They seek to kill you with this torture. They thought I couldn't last 2 years. They never imagined I would make it this long.
He suffers from symptoms like headaches, weakened eyesight, and shortness of breath. Despite the symptoms, Wang says that his mental health is intact. He underwent 2 MRIs and a CT scan, showing that his brain is still functioning normally. Wang began in Beijing in 2015. It's taken him 4 years to get confirmation about the technology from China's Ministry of Public Security.
The reception staff of the Public Security Ministry said that they indeed have this kind of equipment. It's very expensive. It's available in all police departments at the county level and above. The equipment can monitor your thinking and send voices to your mind and talk to you in your head. That's what they said.
Wang says the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, currently uses the technology to control tens of thousands of people. He says he's also spoken with other victims who describe suffering the same round-the-clock noise in their minds. Some of them reportedly couldn't bear it and are believed to have committed suicide, but more and more victims have started to speak out. The CCP hasn't hidden its intention to weaponize mind control. Regime media mouthpiece Xinhua reprinted an article earlier last year speaking highly of the technology's military and wartime value. The article says the purpose of mind control weapons is not the destruction of an enemy's flesh, but of his will. It also says the new technology doesn't require a chip implanted in the human brain. Instead, electromagnetic waves, light, sound waves, smells, among other things can be used. Reporting by Xu Wenhui, NTD News.
Can directed energy weapons, abbreviated DEW, really hit targeted individuals, TIs, in their homes throughout days and nights? Demonstrably yes, DEW passed through walls and even grounded Faraday cages more than mobile phone reception and Wi-Fi. We'll next see a 1-minute example from a bedroom in Massachusetts into which there was no conventional line of sight, verified by a supplier of shielding material for the U.S. White House.
They're ongoing directed energy weapon shots to the head. They're stronger right now to the back. It's in the vicinity of 1:39 a.m. March 16th, 2021.
Before I lose battery here, I just wanted to make sure. Is it okay? Do I have permission to record any of our conversations? Sure. All right, thank you. All right, bye for now.
He is indeed being microwave, and our company deals in this. We've helped numerous people save their life because they can die. And it's a serious thing. We're not a fly-by-nighter. We furnish the White House with our products.
First, we learned that targeted individuals' torture experience is real, like CIA's MK-Ultra and Project Moonstruck. Then we saw how piezoelectric conduction can impart directed audio. We saw reports from experts in the US, UK, and China. We saw and heard directed energy penetrating a targeted individual's home with unconstitutional through-wall, ceiling, or floor surveillance. Now we'll settle in for just under 20 minutes sped up from a discussion with Craig LaForest and Robert Duncan in January 2023. We hope you find it eye-opening and share it onward. Thanks for watching.
It gives me my great pleasure to introduce my mate, scientist Dr. Robert Duncan. And I'm just going to pass this over to Robert to initiate the whole discussion and give us a little bit of background on yourself. And
sure.
That'll be wonderful.
Okay. I went to a private school in Connecticut, and then on to Harvard. I worked for an artificial intelligence company that did image recognition. And I went back to school for a master's in biomechanical engineering, robotic engineering, and then I went to school again and got a master's in business administration, did a stint in some other work, went back for more schooling, did a PhD in artificial intelligence, but a very specific field, which is genetic algorithm optimization of artificial neural networks. So I did do a stint for doing management consulting. When I got recruited, headhunted by DARPA, Department of Defense, CIA, I wrote the artificial intelligence code to track the Soviet nuclear submarine fleet, worked on robotic surgery for the Army, voice recognition, conversation planning for chatterbots, voice of God weapons we used in war, in the Gulf War, for example.
This is the V2k.
V2k, where we can project a sound you cannot plug your ears for to stop. We told them in their language, this is all a lay down your arms. And it worked quite effectively because the technology is unexplainable to the common person who hasn't experienced it yet. I saw in society a lot of my work being misused on my own population. And this was not supposed to be used on civilians. This was supposed to be a wartime weapon, used for interrogation purposes, perhaps to maybe fatigue the enemy and demoralize them, being misused completely. I started my own investigation about 22 years ago. I became a human rights activist against torture, all forms of torture, but mainly this kind of torture that Craig will talk about what's happened to him and people all around the world. So my agenda since then has been to enlighten people, to educate them. I've gone to the Senate Intelligence Committee, met with 23 senators in the United States, with the head of FBI, and to our dismay, our words fell on deaf ears. We met with the Senate Intelligence Committee behind closed doors and, frisked for wires and bugs. They had never heard of MK-Ultra. They were the oversight committee of our intelligence agencies. And we had a huge hearing in the 1970s called the Frank Church hearings, a senator from my state of Idaho. And it was very famous, and it turns out the CIA was doing all this mind control testing on humans in Canada and the United States. So that kind of led me forward to write some books and do events like this, just to educate the world. This is happening. It's probably ramping up. If you know someone, educate them, because the shock and awe of becoming a target, not knowing how it all works and what to expect, is horrifying. Anyway, that's my introduction. So after World War II, the Russians, the winners of the World War II and the United States, along with Britain and others, decided to divide all the German scientists and forgive them of their war crimes. And what we hear about are the missile scientists. but half of them were mind scientists, and they were about psychological warfare of how to socially engineer the world under one world control.
Yeah, so I know that there are numerous scientists who came over instead of going to the Nuremberg trials and being hanged. The US government said, you tell us everything you know about mind control because you've been using children in the concentration camps, and the US received some of these scientists, and some went to Russia, and it's escalated from that period.
The arms race began, and this is for the very soul of man, the cognitive warfare. You're one step ahead if you can control the minds of those with their fingers on the nuclear weapons. This is direct neural interfacing wirelessly while you're sleeping, programming your dreams, making associations that are not your self-autonomous entity. And this is a conversation human race has to have, every government has to have.
We know that the weapons were created for the Iraq War, as an example, to tell the Iraqi troops when they were retreating. You can basically talk into a microphone, and that can radiate out to a couple of miles, 2 or 3 miles, and they use that to tell the Iraqi forces that this is the voice of Allah, put your weapons down.
The voice of God is a broad categorization of both audio techniques, and one's called LRAD, long-range acoustical device, which again can go for a long distance. And then there's the microwave hearing effect. Dr. Frey first invented it, and there's a Dr. Lin in the University of Chicago that has also done work on it. And this is a strange effect that if microwaves are high-frequency radio waves and interact with the brain, it heats it slightly, and then it cools, heats it slightly. And this is done in the extremely low frequency range, and humans can hear voices clicking. Music can be piped into it with different levels of sensitivity, and it depends on the power range window. And that's one type of voice of God weapon. The Army calls it V2k, voice to skull. They removed it from their website because of all the people that are complaining about it. And so that's one aspect. Then there's more sophisticated weaponry that we use brain prints. Everyone has a unique fingerprint. Even more so, you have a unique thought pattern. And so we can cognitively model certain aspects, like a fingerprint of your brain print, if we can get a sample of your MEG, which is called magnetoencephalograph, or your EG, electroencephalograph, reading your brain waves, the electricity and the magnetic radiance that it gives off. Now again, people have difficulty believing we've gone from brain chips, which they used to do in the 1960s with a guy named Dr. Delgado. He was a Yale professor in the School of Medicine for neurology, and he would experiment with humans by inserting electrodes into their brain. He could create any type of emotion. He could move their bodies in certain ways. Very brutal. He even inserted brain chips to do it remotely, just radio frequency brain chips. His most famous experiment was using a bowl, and with the press of the button, as the bowl charged, it suddenly stopped. And that really impressed, obviously, many people in government. How do you control humans? Can we use this for violent criminals, for example? And a whole plethora of opportunities arose. But the research remains dark because we, moral people, would not accept it. Now, in one experiment when I was with DARPA, we were working on the Soldier 2000 project. I went with a bunch of guys with brass and flare, whatever you want to call it, lots of medals, high-ranking guys. We went into the Mass General Hospital and asked for patients with no family, with dementia, and we needed to experiment on them. We said they might walk away, not know where they are. We want to track them. Now, that was the cover story. We were really looking at a full body land, all vital signs for soldiers in the future. Well, that was in 2000. Obviously, we've progressed quite a bit since then. And they gave it to us. Just human beings being trafficked.
There's been such an incredible history of what the United States has done in terms of experimentation.
And this is just what they were caught doing. There was a Dr. Ewan Cameron, head of the World Psychology, and he had CIA funding. He took housewives that had mild depression, played 2-track loop tapes, gave them drugs, LSD, I believe, and the 2-track tapes were very negative. Your family hates you, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to get into the details. It's very awful and evil. And their personalities would be erased in a couple weeks. One woman sued. She got money. She had to learn how to talk in PA. So that's literally brainwashed. You're de-patterning the brain's cultural background, everything it's learned. Then the second half comes in, and that's programming. And then you build up new personalities. The CIA does this for split personality assassins, but it's for splitting personalities. It's also used in a variety of interrogation techniques for high-value targets. So yes, there's a long history of experimenting on the vulnerable people. Usually people can be discredited. We would feed Down syndrome children radioactive cereal, for example, to see how frequently cancers would arise. The list is numerous with syphilis. One, it's non-consensual, but it's also the medical industry itself is such an authority that they can be paid under the table by usually the CIA, but in my case it was the Department of Defense. And they just say national security, that's the buzzword.
In the case of radiation testing, during the Cold War, people would go into hospital just for basic surgery, put under anesthetic, come out with burns on their bodies. And that was part of the process of what was done to people non-consensually. You went in there for basic surgery, and they came out with burns on their bodies, and there was an 18-month investigation into it. And there's a wonderful YouTube video where President Clinton stands up in 1995, October 1995, and he basically says on behalf of the US government, we need to step up and apologise that this is what we've done to people. So when you look at the history, it's overwhelming. Plutonium injection, syphilis, LSD, they injected black women to make them barren. They decided if you were poor or homeless, they could inject you with something as a test subject. There's so many examples.
And Britain did that because homosexuality was illegal to a World War II hero who cracked Hitler's
enigma.
Yes.
Is there not a code of ethics in London?
Well, if I can explain my situation. So I lived in the United States. I moved there in 1983. Knew nothing about this at all. I've been a victim, what we call a targeted individual, for at least 30 years. So I believe that I am one of the victims who at some point after I've during an operation have been chipped or implanted. I literally have voices coming into my head 20 hours a day. I average about 4 hours sleep at night time before I'm woken up with very, very clear voices. I can delineate between my own thoughts and, as Robert alluded to, exactly, the computerized nightmares and dreams that come into my head. I'm burnt from the top of my head throughout my body from these transmissions. I could be on a plane or on a ship anywhere in the world. I've been up to the North Cape, down to Antarctica 4 times, and I'm blown off my feet when these people decide to attack me. So I can literally feel a click, as you were talking about, go from one side of my head to the other, the voices come in, my head starts to swell up, and it's just a technology that no one wants to know about at the moment. You talk to a medical practitioner, and you say, I'm hearing voices, well, they say, well, you're schizophrenic. Schizophrenia doesn't have to be in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So I go through a daily process now, as do hundreds of thousands of people. I'm a board member of an organisation called ICATOR, ICATOR, based in Belgium. It stands for the International Coalition Against Torture and Robotisation of Living Beings. And we are fighting so hard to try and bring this as a war crime before Parliament in Brussels. We have so many people contacting us post-World War II, people who are going through torture every single day. There is not a moment that I'm walking down the street, because transmission can also happen through the eyes. I can be watching a program on TV, Jeopardy, for example. I love Jeopardy. So Jeopardy questions to do with sports, which I don't follow unless it's Australian Aussie rules or swimming. I don't follow American football, but I'm given the answer very, very clearly. I can, as I say, delineate between my own thoughts and those which are coming into my head. And part of this process is also that they take you, as you become so exhausted, they take your sentences and give you the words in advance of you actually producing the words that you want to. So part of my daily routine is I don't respond to the voices at all. They're virtually non-stop.
And you can imagine how useful that would be to manipulate politicians or news broadcasters, is inserting words in their speeches or screwing up their speech, depending on who you want to win and manipulate.
Or being in a meeting and transmitting what you are watching and listening to some...
And that's the spy application.
That's the spy application of it.
And you have no metal necessarily on you, but you're giving off biosignatures, which can be deciphered.
Right.
And it's the ultimate weapon.
So I can literally feel the voices pulsating when they come into my head. So a doctor will refer you to a neurologist. You have a neurologist and a radiologist who looks at the chart very quickly. They're not looking for specific implants or chips. Some of them are so small they're not all made of metal. So MRIs and CAT scans, X-rays don't pick these up. And so you have what's called calcification. The bone grows over the skull. And I just spoke to a neurologist recently, and the neurologist said, yes, we don't go into those areas that we're not looking for a tumour. They're called LFOs, light foreign objects.
As we found out during the Gulf War or Desert Storm, we torture. We do things that the public can't know about because they would feel too much shame that their tax dollars are being used in such a way. They would lose their funding potentially. But there are other ways other than chipping. There are about 26 other ways, but I'm not going to get into them. And all are being explored. That's why they need so many humans to do this survey, if you will. And still one such example is magnetic nanoproteins. Now, how they're delivered to the individual, there's a variety of mechanisms that can do that. But they permanently attach to the nerve cells, the brain cells, and hence just a magnetic field that is biosynchronized, biocorrelated to your brain pan will only affect you, not the person next to you. So you've been turned into a cell phone, in a sense.
Hearing about the Havana syndrome in the United States, which is where some of these diplomats have been targeted.
The Havana syndrome is kind of counterintelligence. There's an FBI agent who's recent in Florida suing the U.S. government. He knows about it. The doctors who are in charge of it have a very specific set of guidelines to call someone that they have Havana syndrome, and that's vestibular damage to the ear, mild traumatic brain damage. Now, we can do that with acoustic weapons. We can do it with microwave weapons, often called directed energy weapons, DOEs. You'll hear that acronym used. And Havana syndrome is just a small subset of this much broader picture of hundreds of experiments going on. The minimum I can estimate by those who speak English, connected on the internet, that are even aware, 10,000 in the United States. Clearly, this is much larger than that, and it has to be scaled worldwide.
We were talking about it earlier on through ICATOR. We've established that there's at least around the world 1 million people who have been either implanted or their brains have been mapped, and they're going through this absolute torture. We know that in China alone, there are 400,000 people who have what I have, the V2k, who are hearing very clear voices and have gone before the Beijing court and demonstrated and said, this is what's going on, this is what you're doing to your own citizens. We're just absolutely overwhelmed at ICATOR from people contacting us. And Robert, also, through the work that we do on the media, I can't keep up with the number of people who are contacting us. And I think you're hearing similar stories about the effects of this, of sleeping and patterns.
Yes, so I should say how I do my research. And I'm very picky on who I identify as what's called a targeted individual, TI. The CIA uses scripts, and they have names, but they're basically to cause confusion, panic, fear. That's the basis of depattering a person before you reprogram them.
And so the effects of this, though, you're hearing similar stories about people going through what I go through.
Right. So those are the classifications, and if they follow the scripts, then I'll include them in my data. But I'm very good about privacy. I will not put someone's name to their interview. I've interviewed about 2,500 people in order to get a good sample of everything that's going on, find the commonalities. And I quit interviewing because it's so obvious.
And we're estimating that 60% of the victims are women and 40% are men. And you've got an interesting...
Well, yeah, I'm not disagreeing. Those are the ones that have come forward. Typically, when you're creating a programmed assassin or a spy or a psychobomb, we have a lot of shootings in the U.S. And many of them hear voices. And that's a social engineering technique, possibly, to take away gun rights. But you can make a person believe they hear a specific voice. And that's voice morphing, something I worked on. And you only need a sample, a small sample of anyone on a telephone. The NSA collects it all, so all your voices have samples. And they can throw your family, dead relatives' voices if they already have a sample from the past that's been collected. It reminds me of Nancy Reagan, who was channeling some dead relatives. That can all be another form of manipulation of leaders. And so it's a very devastating technology in terms of democracy, religion, and even crime and punishment. If you don't know whose mind is actually manipulating that person into violence or criminal activity, there is no justice because you're linking a body, not the person's autonomy and free will. So
it's interesting. There's a chap by the name of Ewan Cameron, and some of the people who are very close to me recognise the connection that I have with James Cameron.
Right.
So not that they're related at all. I used to live with James Cameron, the scientist director of Avatar and Terminator. During the time I was living with him for about 4 months in Malibu, we went up to promote Avatar in Seattle, Washington, and we did a side trip to a company called iLabs. And there's a lot of brain research there, and we saw the transmission of thoughts from a child onto a screen. So the child literally was given the names of animals, and the child was projected up onto a screen.
Yeah, and you're the warfare unit. I like that the civilian scientists are catching up, and it's not going to be regulated until the civilians catch up and say, look at what we can do. We can connect monkey brains to human brains. Now, Duke University, what they're experimenting with is called emergent minds and topologies of brain networks. What that means is you can connect 3 people's brains together. They do monkeys at Duke University, and they become hyper intelligent. Not just like 3 people talking. They become one mind, a super intelligence, and they can solve problems, mazes, and other things that a single monkey can't do. Now that's quite interesting. You imagine warfare strategy or other solving the world's problems that might be useful. Who's going to volunteer? This is the problem. You're utilizing other people's brain capacities.
And it's in a variety of languages. So we have a very good friend in the United States who lives just outside Chicago, who's also on panels talking about this, Dr. Lindbergh, and he's been diagnosed with this. And the voices which come into his head are all in Russian.
In Russian, and they use his family members' voices for the derogatory remarks.
And he's been recognised by the US government as having this, which is so fantastic. I want to talk about the acronyms that we talked about earlier. One is TAMI, one is Mind, and one is Satan.
Okay, and these are all subsystems and evolutions of mind control technologies. But I'm going to start back even further. There's one called REHIC, and it stands for Remote Hypnotic Inter- or Intra-Cerebral Control. And what that means is at a distance, and this is an old CIA technology, at a distance we can control thoughts, behaviors, moods, and the cerebral part obviously uses the highest level form of our identity, our ego, our processing power that integrates all the other parts of our brain. And some of these other acronyms are systems that we develop. Mind is magnetically integrated neuron duplicator, so we can actually duplicate virtual neurons into a person, as well as clone that personality into a supercomputer. And it's not 100% fidelity, but a lot of the rich people are investing in this technology because they don't want to die. It's kind of silicon immortality is what they're going for. They won't achieve it because it's impossible to get 100% accuracy.
And I just wonder, what kind of person continues doing this to another person? The torture is overwhelming. We don't only have dictatorships, but we have people who are sponsoring this as well continually.
Yeah, but you were asking about 2 more acronyms.
Yes, TAMI
and
Satan.
You can make them give out their network of who they meet, and that kind of thing. And then Satan, that's the evil part of it. You know, CIA is quite known for assassinating leaders they don't like and people. That stands for silent assassination through adaptive networks. Now, that can be neural networks, like what your brain is made of, through dysfunction, or it can be social networks, making the person isolated and throwing their voices and making them believe all their family and friends are against them. And so the hypnosis, the remote hypnosis, REHIC, works better if a person is isolated, then has a good support group, and it's about destroying the person from every direction they can. And no one's going to believe them. What, whole government's out to get you? Who are you? Why would they do that? And those are typical questions. They do it because they have to get the data or they want to use you. In any study, they need a sample of all languages, all cultures, all people to make sure the weapon works on everything.
And the reason we do this work now is that Rob's an educator and I'm just one of the victims talking about it. And we will continue doing this as long as we have to make people more aware of the situation. So
any good human can't just sit by and watch people get destroyed.
So we do this because we want to share the information so that you can then go on and share it with people as well. That's what we ask for.
Right. And then there'll be more pressure and the politicians will have to not play dumb anymore, and the newspapers and mass media can't hide it with all this counterintelligence that goes on. How are we doing on time?
Yeah, I think we're just at that point where we could take questions. So I'm going to ask Sam, if you have a question you'd like to ask, please just put your hand up. We'll get as many questions as we can get done. Yes, Cash.
Hi, Doctor. So I know that you've been involved with creating these chips from what you've been talking about, and I know it's probably a lot harder than what it comes across, but couldn't we come up with a GoFundMe page and you create something to detect the chip so you can just remove it from somebody rather than trying to expose these people? Because I think these evil people just won't stop.
A lot of people have tried that. The chips, if they were chips, there are potentially expensive ways you could find them. Your group...
So it stands for ICATOR, International Coalition Against the Torture and Robotization of All Living Beings.
And there are many of these groups that have sprung up all over the world. They try to get funding. They try to identify that someone's chip, and I'll put a caveat in that, they're giving off radio frequencies at certain points of their body in anechoic chambers, shielded from the outside world. You can't fully shield anything. And I've worked in some when I was working at the Navy. We used a lot of anechoic chambers. So it's a good idea, but it's a lot more complex than that. And then who do you give the evidence to? Go to your congressman? They'll just shrug their shoulders. Go to a judge? They don't know anything about this. So to answer your question, why would a government give out grants to stop their own weapon? It's very expensive. For example, a good experiment would be a superconducting liquid nitrogen, high temperature yttrium barium copper oxide 3 chamber to do some of the testing on. That's $10 million. Eventually, hopefully, Elon Musk will get some good scientists to look into it further.
How effective are Farades cages or military, like anti-espionage Farades cages?
And Anne has come down from Mossman, and Anne is also a target. She's a target individual also.
There's a standard that's basically the allowable electromagnetic frequencies some of the secure labs are allowed to have. They're in Faraday cages. They'll show certain frequencies. I would look at the stealth bomber, the types of technologies they use to dampen radar frequencies and absorb them. Most people can't afford a good one. They don't know the right thicknesses, what frequencies can be filtered out. And the system, I think I can say this, is it can adjust to any frequency range. It's full spectrum, as well as ELF waves, which is extremely low frequencies, the one that submarines use to broadcast to the depths of the ocean. That penetrates almost everything. So they're extremely hard to block. But in terms of testimony of the people, some people who have built them, they say it does dampen. And so far, all the techniques to help people are jammers or dampeners. And that will clear up their head a little bit. And then they can maybe get on with life a little better. But so far, there's no 100% effectiveness that we know of.
What's the criteria for targeting? And what is the end goal?
Yeah. The end goal.
May I just?
Yeah, please.
So in my situation, I think I provided the targeters an opportunity. They sourced these people very carefully. And I believe that because I was traveling while I was in the United States, so much back and forth to Europe, I used to be a director for a luxury cruise line. In my situation, I provided them an opportunity to test the effects from satellite or wherever it was bounced off the ionosphere when I was up in all these different countries or down in the southern area of Earth. And I've just found that my targeting, my torture has escalated the more I talk about it, but I don't have an opportunity to do anything else. I travel as much as I can still. I do these fundraising concerts here, which I love to do, which are just fantastic. And I have to keep my life as simple as I can now, but I won't give up. They will never. I call these people cats. CATS, cowards, actors, and traitors. And one day, their 9 lives will run out.
So, Craig, that's your feeling of why you were targeting?
Absolutely.
Historically, the government looks for people who can be discredited. They either don't have a voice in society, but of all the people I've interviewed, depending on how honest they were with me, it looks more random to me than anything. They're testing it on a broad range of people. Now, what I hear is like with Craig here, if you identify with a group, or you get convinced they're targeting that group, and I can name every religion in the world, and they believe they're being targeted specifically for their religion, for example. And that's kind of led me to my conclusion. This is a broad swath of all humans on the planet.
Yeah.
And the end goal?
Oh, and the end goal is total control. Total control.
I worked as a nurse in the emergency department for about 30 years, and we used to get several people coming in and saying, the government's, attacking me and torturing me. And before I was a target, I just look at them and go, are you on antipsychotic medication? When I became one of the TIs or one of the people, I completely...
Yeah, you're good point. The walls of your reality came crashing down.
Right. It's so difficult to explain to any normal person because they can't imagine that the government will be abusing innocent...
Yeah, they even put it in the medical literature. If someone says the government's doing this to them, you have to classify them as...
So, thank you, everybody, for being here today. And please, all I ask is, to all of you and to anybody around the world who is sharing this today, please talk to your friends, your family about what's going on and how real it is. We need to stop this. Future generations are going to suffer otherwise. And so we will keep fighting and doing our best. And as I mentioned, if you'd like to help us out with like a tour, that would be absolutely wonderful. So thank you, my dear friend.
No,
thank you so much.